Good morning again to those who've just joined us. I'm Graham Canning, and you're very welcome this morning wherever you're dialing in from. This is the second of our Out of the Crisis webinar series through People-Centered Excellence. And I'm shortly going to introduce my PCE colleague and Lean Mentor International owner, Mike Denison. So let's talk about Mike Denison. So if you want to flip over, Mike, in the presentation to your next slide. So this is Mike. Mike's one of the UK's most experienced lean coaches and mentors. Mike's got first-hand experience through his time at Toyota, so he knows the Toyota production system from the inside, and he's worked as a senior manager at D-Side at the Toyota engine plant there for many years, and that included training. He had the honour of training over in Japan at Toyota City as well as part of that. So these days he speaks regularly and he writes about lean management and leadership, and he helps businesses across many sectors, not just manufacturing. He helps people in the public sector and service industry as well. So Mike now combines his knowledge of coaching and leading with an interesting slant about people development. He has a passion for developing people, as I'm sure will come through in his presentation. And pretty much his ethos is around people engagement and getting leaders to engage with their people to drive business improvement. So we're delighted that he's joining us today to share those valuable insights. I've known Mike and worked with Mike for a few months now, and his insight and his coaching and mentoring is second to none in my view. So Mike's going to talk about how we can lead with questions and help our team through this time of crisis. It's very pertinent. So, Mike, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Sure. Thanks, Graham. I appreciate it. I hope everyone's keeping safe and well in these difficult and unprecedented times. So what I'd like to do is actually start with a question. And the question I'd like you to just put into the poll. So, Graham, if you could open it up. How easy is it to lead with questions? If you could just make some information into the poll. How easy do you find it to lead your team with questions? Is it easy? Somewhat easy? Neither easy nor hard, it's just what you do. Fairly difficult or very difficult? And Graham, if you could just give me a reading on the poll when it comes out, because I can't actually see it on my screen.
Yeah, we'll do. There's some answers coming in here. Interesting that nobody is finding it very difficult yet. So that's good. Either we're very confident, but the biggest category so far with 39% of the vote is quite difficult.
Okay.
And 25% in neutral, 21% in somewhat easy, and 17% in very easy. So I'm interested in the 16% who consider it to be very easy. Need to be thinking about how they can coach some of the people in their organisation who find it quite difficult, I would say.
Absolutely. I was actually going to say, so if you're finding it very easy, what brings you on the webinar? Maybe it's just to meet you and I. But even if you find it easy, I'm promise you, you're going to get value from what I'll share with you today, because actually questions is a very important element of the design of the questions and creating the questions that matter. So especially for those who find it difficult or either, you know, somewhat neutral in that poll, my aim is to give you some ideas on how you can make it easy for yourself. I personally believe that leading with questions is one of the most powerful and effective ways to lead people. I practiced it, I coach people, I mentor other people in it, and I found it to be incredibly powerful. And so the challenge really is how easy is it to remember the types of question to ask, or just to structure a meaningful question? And it's not that easy, especially when it's not part of your habit. It's not your habitual way of how you engage and how you talk with people. Very often we've learned to tell people what to actually do. But what I'd like to do is just give you 4 questions that are really easy to remember, to take you less than 30 seconds. And these questions will be so easy for you to remember. So just memorize these for a moment. Try asking somebody, what do you think? And I'm sure everyone has done this. And we ask them and they give us a little bit of an answer. But then we often don't push it. Next one is, and what else? And then we should ask a third question, and tell me, what else do you think? And then even a 4th time, so what else do you think? And just using that pattern can actually make a huge difference, because what you're doing is you're digging and digging and forcing somebody to think deeper and deeper into their brain as to what they are thinking about this particular situation. So you could apply these questions, and yes, it's easy to lead with questions. If you just ask these four, you will have a positive impact. But still, some leaders find it incredibly difficult to practice the art or the skill of leading with questions, because it's not natural. It's not in their habit. So I want to give you a bit of a backstory and frame the value and impact of leading with questions, especially as we push through and work together to come out of this crisis. So what is a crisis? Well, a crisis refers to an unexpected or unplanned situation or threat that suddenly dawns upon a business. It can come out of nowhere, and it means that that event or situation threatens the very stability of how a business operates. And what you could say is we are really in a crisis now. It's affected everybody globally, and some organizations and some sectors it's affected more than others. But it's a different kind of crisis from what many of us have experienced. And in lots of cases, leaders actually don't really know how to deal with this situation. They're struggling with it. They're struggling with how do I give my people confidence, and how do I decide what the next thing to do is, when actually we don't even know when we're coming out of it. So a crisis perpetuates a sense of a lack of control through the business, worsening the whole situation. And you could divide crises into three different categories. There's creeping crises. These are foreshadowed often by a series of events. Decision makers don't view as part of a pattern. Typically, these could be rumor, deterioration of performance, a market shift, something that's happening over a long period of time, and gradually it dawns on us that it's a situation we need to deal with. Or there could be a slow burn crisis. We get some advance warning before the situation has caused any actual damage. Maybe it's an external event or situation, and it's gradually having a worsening impact on the business. Air travel, for one, is one of the things that comes to mind now. Whilst we're all struggling with this, air travel is just going to rapidly change over the next couple of years because of the nature of what this has presented us. And then there's finally sudden crises. Maybe damage has already occurred and it will get worse the longer we take to respond. And so it could be something like a component failure in the field, or a sudden loss of a number of clients. And we need to deal with it really, really quickly. And in a sudden crisis, we need fast, urgent action, get me out of here now type of leadership. But in a creeping or a slow burn crisis, we need a slower, wider, impacting type of leadership. We need to plan and organize, engage and collaborate with people. We need to get this right to succeed. And we're actually in a combination of the second and third type of crisis at the moment. So crisis requires the ability to lead a business out of this unfavorable situation. And I used to teach people, over the years when I've been training people, training leaders in how to be better coaches, how to lead better with questions. I used to teach people that in a crisis, it was a time for a leader to be directive, because you haven't got time to think something through. And you don't want to be actually asking somebody when the building's on fire to actually, well, where's the door, the best door to get out? Or what would you do to actually, manage this particular fire? Sometimes you just need to take action, make quick decisions. And if you've got the experience, that's the right thing to do. But more recently, I've realized that in this type of crisis, it's not about speed of action. It's actually about collaboration and engaging people. So what do people expect of their leaders? Well, for a start off, they want to expect you to have all the answers. They probably want you to be able to, say what's going to happen in the future. They want some direction. Certainly, they want some level of understanding about the sustainability and the security of the company for the future. They want a level of follow me leadership. They want to be able to follow behind you because they think that you can actually take them through this situation. But we don't know all the answers, especially in these unprecedented times. They want clarity in what to do, and what's the impact of this situation on them and the business. They want some caring and conscious communication. And sometimes this can mean more frequent communication. And they're looking for confidence in the future, that there is a future of sorts, as long as they can see that perhaps they're going to be part of that future in the organization. They want to trust you. They want to feel that we're all in this together. And these are unprecedented, remarkable times. And in these type of situations, this calls for remarkable collaboration. And I was reading more recently, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal only last week, and it said, if COVID-19 was a leadership test, it came back negative. Now, that's quite frightening, isn't it, when you think about it? And what they're saying is leaders actually don't fully, or some leaders don't fully understand what their people expect of them in these times. They don't expect, that people are looking to understand how somebody thinks. They want to feel cared for. They want to be engaged. So a couple of examples that presented itself to me. One was a CEO. His name was Dan Price. He was the CEO of Gravity, and Gravity is a credit card processing company. And I think what he demonstrated as leadership in these times is exemplary. He had a situation of, does he cut 20% of his people or does he go bankrupt? And he said to his people, do you know what? He said, I don't know how to fix this. I've got no idea. So what do you think I should do? And he asked them, what else could I do? What other ideas have you got? And basically, as people came back, they took pay cuts, they changed the way they were working, and basically they proved to him that there was a way in which he could keep his business open in this particular situation. And what he said was, be open and honest with people, listen to them, work together, and find a way in which you can collaborate. And I think that's a perfect opportunity for us to demonstrate how we could lead with questions in this type of situation. So where are we at the moment in time? So basically what I'm finding in some of the organizations I've connected with and kept in touch with, that actually people are stepping up. In these situations, people are wanting to contribute. They're actually taking on more responsibilities. They want to see that they can be trusted, and they want to trust and be respected by their leaders. They want a level of engagement in there. They want to feel that there's a relationship that belongs between them and their leaders. They want to feel that they're in it together. They want to be supported. They want to know that you care about them. They want to be involved in helping us move through this. In the past, they may well have stood back and thought, well, actually, do you know what? We can leave it to somebody else. But now people want to engage. They want to be part of it. And they certainly want to contribute. So we can capitalize on this in lots of organizations, whether people are working at home or whether they're working, on site at the moment. Things are changing and people want to contribute to that. So support them, involve them. And if you want to 10 times your leadership impact, one of the ways to do that is try leading with questions. Now, I've talked about trust, and trust is a huge factor in times of uncertainty, and we have huge levels of ambiguity, and we have a level of volatility at the moment. So when you demonstrate trust and respect, people start to have confidence that we can get through this. So where does trust come from? Well, trust is a combination of a number of features within a relationship. Trust is an outcome. It's not a matter in itself. It's an outcome of a set of inputs to a relationship. And trust has its foundations where your own orientation lies. Now, I have a model that I use when I talk about trust. And basically, there are 3 what I call higher level factors. And these are the elements of credibility, consistency, and intimacy. And as a leader, if you're credible and you're consistent in what you do, and you have a level of intimacy, means you understand and you care for somebody, then people will start to try and build trust with you. However, there are some underlying foundational factors that sit beneath this. And these are your orientation towards, whether you orientate towards other people or towards yourself. If your orientation is more towards yourself, then people will see you as a high risk factor to trust you, because they will be thinking you are more interested in yourself than them. If your orientation is more towards other people and sharing and caring and engaging and developing those people, then they have a higher propensity to want to trust you. So trust is a big element of that. Think about it. So one of the elements that I came across when I was at Toyota has a philosophy called respect for people, and it's an inbuilt core. It's part of that whole organization. It's based on what I call the inverted organization, where leaders are taught and reinforced on the value and responsibility to support and enable their people. In other words, building an organization that's framed around mutual trust and respect. It was a big part of how we operated. So building trust is the means for demonstrating respect for people. I think it's one of the key ways in which we can do that. It's about if you do that, it's about people will actually go the extra mile, because if they feel psychologically safe with you, they're prepared to put more effort in. They'll put discretionary effort in to try and push themselves through the challenges that we have. And if we spend time engaging with people, involving people, maybe enabling people and challenge them, But most of all, if we spend time supporting people, then people will come to the party. They will start to work with us, and they'll start to apply some of the things that they feel that they can actually do. Now, traditional leadership, fundamentally, leaders often tell people what to do. And that's because they feel that it's their responsibility. But here's the thing, that the way I've looked at it is leaders who tell people what to do, who solve their problems for them, I feel that they're actually robbing them of an opportunity to think for themselves. They're taking something away. And Einstein had a well-known statement, and he said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. And take that to another level. Steve Jobs says it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. As leaders, we have years of experience, and this does make us somewhat expert in what we do. And we have a lot of the answers. And we've been told that we need to manage people, and we do this by directing what people should actually do, and in many cases, how to do it. We direct people what to do, how to do, because we actually think we know more than them, and basically, in lots of cases, that they can't be trusted. And we're there to solve difficult problems, and we're there to make decisions. But actually, I think when we do this, we create a culture of learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is where people have learned not to feel accountable for things. But this is the way we can change it. And leading with questions is one of the ways in which we can change that. If you're a leader who actually leads by directing people, you can become the constraint of an organization. And a question that I will often use with people, and I will say to you, as a leader, are you actually a diminisher, or are you a multiplier? Are you a diminisher and holding people back? Or are you somebody who multiplies the capability in an organization, and the capability so that people can actually take your organization further? This is a quote that I came across, about 12, 13 years ago, and I was surprised when I actually looked at it. Harvey Firestone was an industrialist, as you well know. We make Firestone tires, and in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, he was a big collaborator with Henry Ford, and he said the growth and development of people is the highest calling of leadership. Just think about that for a moment. The growth and development of people is the highest calling of leadership. That tells us something. So let me give you another model to work from. You may be familiar with the inverted organization. It's where we turn the organization upside down, and it has its roots in TQM. It's a model of growth, really. It's not just about customer satisfaction and customer focus and value. That is the fundamental where it came from. But it's a model for growth of leaders supporting people where value is mostly added. It's growing people to grow the business. And if you think about it, the whole ethos about this is leaders throughout the organization coach, support, develop, and mentor the people who report into them so that they can continually increase the value that they provide to the customer. And it's this role model coaching and supporting that sets the direction and expectations, that ensures the organization is continually developing its capacity and capability for expansion. There's a huge focus in that organization of Toyota for teaching people and coaching people on the job. And this ensures that the DNA of the organization is continuing and developing the culture for the future. So let me just look at the difference between asking and telling. This is one of the reasons why some people or some leaders struggle with asking questions to their teams. They feel like telling is like you're adding value. When you're a leader, when you tell somebody, it feels like you're adding value because you're using your knowledge and you're strengthening your position as a leader. Telling shows everyone that you know your stuff. It reinforces your ego. We get some positive strokes from that, and it reinforces our position. And telling sometimes feels like it's the fastest way to get something done. Why would you ask someone a question when you can actually just tell them and it's done? Take it the other way. Asking, for somebody who is used to telling, asking feels like we're giving away our power and our knowledge. It feels slow because we have the answer, and surely this is a quicker way than having the other person taking time to think it through. And asking has a risk that someone may actually do the wrong thing. Asking has a risk that I may be actually vulnerable, make myself vulnerable. I might give the impression that I don't know something. And the truth is that telling has very little impact on developing someone's potential. People don't learn when we tell them what to do. People learn when we ask them questions. Now, potential is one of the things that we want to grow in an organization, or I think it is. Clearly, if we develop the potential of an organization, it has the capacity to do far more. Now, every person in the world, every human being has huge potential. They have the potential to be greater, more capable, achieve more, and learn more than most of us will ever realize in our lifetime. And most people never really exploit it. I will often ask people to draw a circle, and you might try this if you've got some note paper in front of you. Draw a circle that fills the whole size of the note paper, and then draw another circle that's smaller than that, maybe to the bottom of the piece of paper, and draw a little figure in that smaller circle. Well, that circle represents the potential that you probably think you have for yourself. And in some cases, it's the potential that a leader believes that you have. But the reality is, it could be 10 times that if you were allowed to exploit what actually exists in your brain. So when, as a leader, if you look at someone with the intent to help them grow into their potential, you're actually creating future leaders. When you lead with questions, by asking, you're actually empowering their thought. And so leaders can help people grow into their potential. Leaders who help people grow into their potential are often more successful leaders. Some of you may well have seen this model, certainly those people who've worked with me. I call it the human behavior systems model, and I call it the results funnel. And it's a funnel of basic psychology. And principally, when you look at results, results come as a result of people's behaviors and their actions. And sometimes people say, yeah, if you want to get different results, all you have to do is change your behavior. But have you ever tried changing a behavior? Have you ever told somebody if you try changing your behavior, it'll make a difference? Well, people resist that. Why do they resist it? Because you're forcing them to change. They want to make that decision for themselves. And behaviors and actions, when you actually break it down, actually come from our thoughts and our feelings. They come from our thoughts and our feelings because we have actually processed something. We've built it up, we understand it, and then we express that in a behavior and an action, and that produces a result. So if you really want to change and get different results, yes, we want to change behaviors and actions, but we need to work on people's thoughts and feelings. And that's when we're, as a leader, if we lead with questions, it can make a big difference. But we need to think even further than that, because our thoughts and feelings come from experiences and insights. And they come from our social conditioning, the environment we work in, the teachings that we've had, or the culture sometimes that we exist in. So if we want to change how people think and what people do and develop them so that they're more capable, if we spend some time actually influencing how people think, we can lead with questions, we can develop and change their thoughts. And we even know now from fMRI scans that when we ask meaningful questions, this can fire up 80 to 90% more brain cells, more neural cells in someone's brain than if we tell someone what to do. Now, there's a real message there for me. There's a message that says that there's a deeper resonance and the depth is far greater than if we're actually asking questions. And I think this is so powerful to understand. Now, the challenge of asking questions or leading with questions is, what type of questions do I ask? So let's have a look at that. I developed a model several years ago. I call it the 5 levels of asking questions. And let me take you through these 5 levels. First of all, there's a level 1, which I call naive questions. And that's when we ask a question because we know we need to ask a question. It seems like the right thing to do, but there's not a lot of thought behind the question. Often it's a closed question. It can be quite limiting. Maybe just asking someone, what were you thinking when you did that? Or can you do something? It doesn't really stretch somebody. Then there's what we call superior questioning. And this is when we ask questions to present that we're actually more intelligent than the other person. So we use questions to demonstrate how superior we are. Third level is when we ask questions and we're gathering information now, but we're gathering that information so that we can make a decision or we can solve a problem. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, except that in this case, we're not giving the other person the chance to think it through for themselves. We're asking the question, they're feeding the answer because they know that we're going to process it and do the analysis and come up with a solution. We need to move people up to what I call level 4. So if you're leading with questions, you should be leading with level 4 types of questioning, where you're gathering information for the other person to learn from your question. So when we ask questions to gather the information, the other person has to think And the deeper they think, the more likely it is they'll get insights and ideas that will help them. This kind of questioning can seem similar to level 3, but now your intent is actually about getting the other person to think it through and find solutions for themselves. And then finally, level 5 is what we call breakthrough questions. So when we ask a powerful question that really hits the mark, it causes a really deep level of thinking. And this type of question causes somebody to reflect deeply about something. And you always know when you've got a powerful question, because generally they go quiet. They might take a deep breath, their eyes might move around a little bit. And if you just give them that time, you will find that they will get insights that they would have never had if they hadn't done this. Now, the interesting thing is, the further up that scale you go towards level 4 and 5, the more effort it takes from me as a leader. But the benefits are the increasing growth that you'll get from the individual that you are asking the questions of. So what's the impact of asking questions? Well, questions have a significant impact on how someone thinks and explores a question. Great questions develop people, not just for now, but for the future and beyond. Questions wake people up, they prompt new ideas, they help people discover new places to go, new ways of doing things. And when you ask a question instead of giving an answer, the entire brain gets active. Questions engage people. They prompt the thinking process. They can challenge the way we think. They can expand our awareness. The right questions can build trust. Questions can change the way in which we think. Questions can change lives. Okay, questions themselves are useful. Here's why. Some of you, I don't know whether any of you have actually looked at what happens when we ask a question. So when you look inside of our brain, the activation of the brain through questions is called epistemic curiosity, if you want to go to the psychology of it. It's a fancy word, but the reality is what happens is it releases serotonin and dopamine. And when you ask a question instead of giving an answer, the entire brain gets active as it reflects, releasing serotonin. It causes us to relax. And that serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It's a mood transmitter that causes feelings of well-being, calmness, and happiness. And this encourages the gathering of intelligence from all areas of the brain, allowing far more insight than what would happen if you provided solutions. We get new neural connections begin to be made as the brain moves closer to finding those solutions. And as serotonin is released, a rush of energy or insight occurs as the brain fires up, moving ahead to discover the solutions to a problem or an idea to actually answer the question. And these are the perfect conditions set for the brain to respond to the question. And we get a rush of dopamine. And dopamine is what we call the reward neurotransmitter. And it's released in anticipation of gain and pleasure and growth. And the search and satisfaction that we get for finding a possible answer to the question provides what we call intrinsic motivation. It's an activity for its own sake, which can be pleasurable and leaves a resonance of learning transferred to our long-term memory, as opposed to when we're told something, the information tends to sit in our short-term memory and then we tend to forget. So a person who is the recipient of the question becomes motivated and ready to do something. So impactful questions engages someone on a much deeper level, creating new neural connections and actually rewiring, in many cases, someone's brain. So what happens when we ask a question? Well, first of all, serotonin is released, and serotonin causes us to relax, and that releases dopamine. And when you look at it, if you were to actually trace the serotonin pathways and the dopamine pathways, the red pathways in the brain, and we can get this from MRI scans and the firings, these are follow through the whole whole shape of the brain, and eventually end up moving all the way through the brain, looking for answers to enable us to actually answer the question. And then when we are relaxed enough and we start to find those answers, the dopamine rushes in, and it rushes to the front of our brain mainly. It rushes to the center of our brain around what we call the amygdala. And am I safe to answer this question? And if people feel psychologically safe, then they go searching in their prefrontal cortex at the front of our brain to try and find all the thoughts and the answers that would actually enable them to answer that question. Now, the key thing for us to remember here, there's 5 things I want you to really take away. Neuroplasticity. We get new neural connections when you ask a question. It encourages creative thinking. Reflection. When we ask a question, the entire brain gets active as it starts to reflect, releasing serotonin. Action. As serotonin is released, we get a rush of energy that occurs as the brain fires up to find an answer. Reward, a rush of dopamine comes as a result of the anticipation of finding an answer and gaining value through that knowledge. And there's a curiosity there. The curiosity to work on a question actually is motivating and causes somebody to want to actually go away and do something with what they've discovered by answering that particular question. There is, however, it's all very well me saying lead with questions, but there is a bit of a mindset, there's an attitude element to this. And so what sort of a mindset do we need to have in order to better lead with questions? It's important to have a genuine interest in the other person's growth and potential, and perhaps seeing them as bigger or more capable than they are now. Developing a healthy curiosity and being non-judgmental could be a way of engaging with somebody. Showing an interest in what people think, what ideas that they have. Having some patience is a good characteristic to develop, not to feel rushed for somebody to give you an answer quickly, give them time to think. Having empathy and understanding a little bit about how they're thinking about things, what's going on in their world. Developing a level of emotional intelligence to understand the world at their level. Being present, being attentive, being what, as some organizations I've come and worked in, they talk about being here now, focusing on the other person. Having a level of humility, not feeling that you need to show that you have the answer or being the expert. And finally, being selfless, focusing on the other person and the other person's development. If you can develop the mindset of these elements, and I know a lot of you on this call or on this webinar will actually already have these inbuilt into the way that you are better prepared to lead with questions. Now, let me give you a few basic skills for leading with questions and explain how this all fits together. There are three basic skills that I believe you need to become an impactful leader who leads with better questions, and they're relatively straightforward. The first one is the skill or the art of listening. Now, listening is a real skill for leadership anyway. Some of you may well have been courses around leadership developments that's covered the skill of listening. It's a key attribute for a leader. Also, the skill of designing questions that matter. Thinking about a type of question that's going to make a person think. And the skill of building a relationship and showing that you actually care for somebody and you're interested in, their development and their growth. So let's have a look at the art of listening, or the skill of listening, to start off with. Stephen Covey, those of you who've ever read any of his books, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written many, many years ago, he had a great statement. He said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply, which tells me that they're only listening to part of what somebody is saying. And listening is an active process. Just even slowing down and paying full attention to people you care for gives you the chance to connect, to build trust, truly understand in a way that words can't actually develop that connection. And great listeners practice listening to get more effective and connect at a much deeper level. Great listening builds relationships. Often words don't really describe something nearly as well as our relationship that somebody will have to those words. And this is where often misunderstandings happen, because people will say a word and someone thinks they understand the word, but the truth is they've never really understood what's sat below the word. So listening is taking in more than words. Listening and paying full attention to people shows you care. It connects you. It builds trust. And the power of what I call attentive silence, which gives people you care about the chance to figure out what's inside of them. Now, there are actually 3 levels of listening. Sometimes people say the 4, but actually I think there's one level. I call it a minus level. I call it not listening. And clearly not listening is not taking in the information. But listening and hearing are not the same. Listening is very active. When you're listening, you're trying to understand what somebody is actually saying, and you're trying to build a level of relationship with that person so that they will express themselves with you. So let me have a look at those 3 levels of listening. So level 1 is what I call internal listening. You could call it conversational listening. It's listening at a cosmetic level, selective listening, sometimes distracted listening. Listening for what it means to me. The focus is more on me than the other person, often focusing with an intent to reply or to speak. Okay, so level 2 is what I call active or attentive listening. And this takes a level of focus, and it means there's a level of effort and paying attention to the other person. You're in tune with the other person. You're listening from what's happening from their perspective, their words, their tone. Maybe you're watching the body language. You're picking up a level of emotion. You're listening with a focus on what the other person's trying to express through the world. So you're listening with a focus on the other person, not on yourself. You've left yourself behind. You're focusing on them. And level 3 is what we call intuitive listening, or empathic. Maybe sometimes people will call it generative listening. This is understanding as much from what is not being said from what is being said. And you get a gut feeling or a sixth sense when you're listening from this level. So you're listening empathically, or what is known as generative listening, listening beyond what appears on the surface, which is connecting yourself with another person. So let me give you 3 elements that will help you develop your listening skills. I call them the poise of listening, focus in listening, and silence in listening. So let's look at the poise to start off with. Let me introduce you to the poise of listening. What do I mean by poise? Well, we're talking about balance. We're talking about the equilibrium of control, the graceful and elegant bearing in a person when they're actually connecting with another person. So the poise of listening has 3 P's in there, 3 principal elements in here. First one is preparation. If you want to listen to somebody, really listen to them, then you might have to get yourself into the right state and mindset for listening. It's important to clear that space, because now you're listening to the other person. This is not what's going on in your head. It's what's going on in their head and you understanding it. So preparing yourself, maybe the environment, maybe getting things out of your head, writing things down, and setting your attention for listening and focusing totally on the other person. Second poise, or P, is presence. The key to developing that attention and holding the focus lies in the leader actually having a genuine interest in the other person's development, being prepared to give your time as a gift for that person to talk and think and basically answer the questions that you've posed to them. So being here now is a skill that requires concentration and silence. Performance. Think about if you were to observe somebody who was telling you that they were a brilliant listener, you'd be looking for certain things, certain traits that they expressed in how they listened. So you should be thinking about, how am I performing as a listener? If someone was videoing me, would they be able to say that, yeah, you're a great listener, you paid attention, you focused on me, you had eye contact, your body language was connected? That's a good way of understanding. Performing as a listener is as much an attitude as it is an action. Now, we talked about focus. Let me give you another little thing to play with. If you really have the intention to listen totally on another person and what they are saying and communicating with you for a period of time, and it can be short, then you need to learn the skill of focus. And actually, focus is a muscle, and it's one that we as humans have become less used to using. There's so many distractions and pieces of information flowing at us. You know, smartphones, communication channels, the marketing messages that we've got, it's influenced us. And actually, I think we're losing the muscle of focus. And they reckon now that the attention span of a human being has now dropped to below that of a goldfish. And it's actually less than 8 seconds before actively we start searching for something new, because we tend to scan things. We flip around from one thing to another. You know, we are taught to multitask, and it's not really adding a lot of value. So focus itself is an acronym. You can turn it into an acronym. I talk about focus is when you have fixated attention on the other person. You're concentrating all of your energy to understand their world with a level of selflessness. That's what focus is all about. And it's a skill, or it's a muscle that we must practice in order to get better at it. The final 3 of what I call the poise of listening is developing silence and space for somebody to think. Thinking requires space. Deep thinking requires even more space. And the key thing around it is, don't contaminate somebody's thinking space by actually interfering with another question or putting something into there. Give them the time to think something through. And this is showing somebody what I call the utmost respect. I don't know whether you've thought about this, but listen is actually an anagram of silent. That teaches an awful lot. And actually, when you think about it, we have 2 ears, 2 eyes, 6 senses. We have 1 mouth. And there's a reason that we were evolved in this way. And that's so that we can connect as human beings. We can connect in a way because we put more emphasis on how we receive information than how we express information. One of the best ways of giving someone silence is what I call trying the 9-second rule. Giving somebody 9 seconds to think something through. Now that seems like a long time, and most leaders will struggle with that because they are so impatient to want to move to something moving forward. But think about it. If you gave someone 9 seconds, they would be able to process that question, which probably means they're going to go deeper into their mind, which also means the likelihood is they're going to come up with some ideas and thoughts. Some may be the ones that you haven't even thought of. Right, the easiest questions to ask. Well, we've already given you them. So what do you think? Great question to ask. I gave you 4 at the front of this webinar. What do you think? And then what was the next one? Of course, what else? And then what else was after that? What else again? And what else again after that? Try it. Try practicing that. Think about using that type of question and what it would actually mean. Maybe people might feel a little bit nervous at first because what they're thinking is, ooh, does that mean I haven't thought of something and the leader's pushing me because he knows something that I don't know? Well, once they start to recognize that you are interested and curious and value what they come back at you with, then you will be engaging with people at a whole different level. They will start to trust you at a whole different level. Now, questions have meaning, but the key thing around it is when you're going to ask a question, make it matter. We are socially conditioned as human beings to respond to questions by initiating a search for an appropriate answer. And when we ask questions that have the intent to get somebody else looking for that information, for the other person to become consciously aware and get insights from that question, that's what we're trying to achieve. So we should be using open questions as much as possible. And open questions always have a what or a how in them. Now, we've got other types of question, but I would guide you to say, design your question to have a what or a how in, and it will be more powerful than if you use other types of questioning words to actually develop the question. Let me give you a couple examples of this. So what do you want to achieve? How might you go about doing this? What ideas do you have? What's the real challenge here? What's your next step? Simple questions, very easy to remember when you think about it. If you apply those in the right context, then what will start to happen is you'll have people thinking at another deeper level. There are, however, some questions that are quite limiting. Typically, these are what we would call closed questions, sometimes what I call judgmental or leading questions, and there's very little thinking involved. But I wanted to give you a set of these because these might be the ones that you are using now, and you can't understand why they're not bringing you the results that you want to bring. So questions such as, did you, can you, will you, is there, can we, do you, must we, have you, has there? If you start your questions or incorporate those in the question, it really limits the level of thinking that another person will do. And you may well know somebody who uses this type of question. It could be you. So the key thing is try and turn those questions into more open questions. So instead of asking, did you, ask, what might you do? Or what else could you do? Instead of asking, can you, ask, what have you thought about? These are much more effective as open questions to help somebody think. So sometimes when I engage with leaders and they will come to me and they'll say, yeah, but it's all very well. If someone comes to me and they want me to solve a problem for them, well, aren't I obliged to do that? Well, yes, you may be, but actually you can better help them by helping them solve their own problem. Give them the types of question that they should be asking themselves to start to develop their thinking, which takes them to a whole new level of developing an understanding about a situation or a problem. So some people have learned that it's best to let their boss sort it out and it's easier to pass it over, and that way they can be less accountable. But again, we're developing this culture of learned helplessness. So try asking these questions in future. When someone comes to you and says, hey boss, or John, Dave, Eric, I've got a problem. Could you help me with it? First thing you should ask is, well, what else could you tell me about it? Okay. And then what do you think else I'm going to ask you? What else can you tell me? And what else? Keep asking those questions, because now I'm starting to understand how deeply they've thought about the problem. And in lots of cases, somebody hasn't thought deeply enough to be able to work their way through the problem themselves. You could ask them, what do you think about this problem? What ideas have you got? What factors do you understand about this problem so far? And maybe what factors don't you understand yet? That's a great one, because that sends them off on a path then to the sort of things that they can then go and learn and discover and investigate to understand the problem at a deeper level. What do you notice about something? It's a great question to ask, because it guides them a little bit towards looking at something without being judgmental and telling them what they have missed. What might you do? Of course, the critical one, what else? Great question to ask. And finally, what other options could you think of? So many ways in which you can ask questions and design questions that are open, cause people to think at a much deeper level. There are a couple of other questioning techniques I'd like to share with you, and one of them is what I call the power of might and yet. And these are two words that if you use them in a question, they can be really empowering. Okay, they have huge levels of influencing power. So when you're asking questions, try and get rid of the coulds and the shoulds in your question and start to ask a might or a yet into the question, such as, what do you think might happen? Okay, what does that do? When you ask, what do you think might happen? It's creating the fact that you're guiding them for a number of possibilities, which causes more thinking. So they're going to expand their awareness about a particular situation. Okay, what might you, oh, go back. Sorry, guys. What might you do in this situation? What else might you do? Okay, and the final one is the yet question. What haven't you tried yet? That is a totally non-judgmental question, because it's basically saying, what thoughts do you have to try something else, to try and learn more about a situation that will actually help them work their way through a particular problem. So we've given you something about listening. We've given you something about questioning. Now what we want to do is build a relationship, which is the third part. And don't forget, building a relationship is all about trust. So don't forget the concept of trust. Credibility, consistency, intimacy, where your orientation is, and how much of a risk is it for somebody to trust you. So you build relationships when you understand what they value, and you can help them gain that value when they engage with you. And so asking questions such as, how do you understand a little bit about how someone ticks, is understanding what's important to them. What do they value in life, in work, in people? Okay, what's important to you about how you work or in your work? What's important to you about what you would like to achieve? Okay, what's important to you about how I lead you? Okay, possibly what improvement suggestions do you have for me? And that's showing that you're interested in them providing you some guidance about how you could better lead a situation. And people don't trust you until they can trust that you care about them. So people spend most of the time with people that they know, like, and trust, and they're happy to engage with people that they know, like, and trust. So I hope I've given you some thoughts and ideas around how you could better lead with questions, especially in this particular type of situation. And the three skills are the art or skills of listening, designing questions that matter, creating little formulas in there that makes questions much more impactful, and then developing a relationship or building a relationship to show that you actually care. And people will then start to feel supported, and they will start to feel that they can contribute more and they can be getting involved. It wouldn't surprise me if they quickly ended up building confidence in their ideas and taking on some new responsibilities, which is exactly what we want and need to be able to get through this particular situation. Finally, I'd just like to leave you with something that, for me, Taiichi Ohno, of course, living and working in Toyota, he was a person who guided us, and he has a very profound effect on how I think and how a lot of organizations think. And this is no accident. I was immersed in that culture for a number of years, and I found in most cases that it was the most effective way to lead. So I'll finish off with Taiichi Ohno's quote. The Toyota style is not to create results by working hard. It is a system that says there's no limit to people's creativity. People don't go to Toyota to work. They go there to think. Just reflect on that a moment. People don't go to Toyota to work. They go there to think. Where's the intention in that? What is he saying there? He's basically saying we need to design systems as leaders that engage people to think more, When people think more, they have a greater opportunity to actually contribute more back to the business. I think we're missing a lot of capability and a lot of potential in organizations. Possibly leading with questions is one way in which we can do that. We can get better capability. So you might be asking, what could I do now? What should I be doing now? Well, take what you've learned and start to practice with some of these things. Practice listening with an intent to understand. Get a notebook and write down some simple questions that you can use and practice. There's a concept that says 10,000 hours and you can become an expert. Well, you don't need 10,000 hours. If you practiced the type of questions that I've given you for 20 hours, within 20 hours, you would feel more comfortable and more confident in asking those types of questions. And it would make a big difference as to how the impact that you're having with your people. Practicing silence, leaving someone space for someone to think. And try asking somebody what's important to you. Try to learn about what they value most. That way it will show that you care. Now, more than ever in our current situation where your people are looking for caring, inspirational and supportive leadership, is the time for asking and leading with questions. And this approach will be key to how many organizations, I believe, will come through and out of the COVID-19 situation. More than ever now is the time to shine as leaders. Engage, enable, and empower your people. And thank you for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts, some of my ideas, some of the things that I like to help leaders with in organizations.